The phone rang at 3 a.m. in Afghanistan. Marcus, they're bulldozing your house tomorrow. The HOA sold it while you were deployed. I stared at the desert stars, rage building in my chest. Back home, the Homeowners Association had just declared war on the wrong soldier. Time for revenge. The phone call came at 3 a.m. in Afghanistan. I was Staff Sergeant Marcus Thompson, 3 months into my second deployment, when my neighbor's panicked voice crackled through the satellite phone. Marcus, they're bulldozing your house tomorrow morning. The HOA sold your property for unpaid fees. My blood turned to ice. What fees? I set up auto-pay for everything before I left. They changed the payment system 6 weeks ago. Sent notices to residents only. No email, no phone calls to deployed soldiers. Your house has been empty, so they claimed abandonment. I stared at the desert stars, rage building in my chest. Back home in Pine Valley Estates, the Homeowners Association had just declared war on the wrong soldier. Pine Valley Estates wasn't just any subdivision. It sat on 847 acres of prime real estate, home to 312 families. What most residents didn't know was that their HOA president, Richard Blackwood, had been running an elaborate scam for years. Blackwood owned Blackwood Construction, the company that built most of the homes. He also controlled the property management firm that handled HOA business. When military families deployed, he'd change payment systems, create impossible-to-meet requirements, then seize properties for abandonment and unpaid fees. My house was just his latest target. A beautiful 4-bedroom home I'd saved 3 years to buy, now sold to his cousin for $15,000 in back fees, a house worth $340,000. But Blackwood made one critical mistake. He messed with someone who knew how to fight back. From my base in Kandahar, I started making calls. My military training had taught me investigation skills, and I put them to work. Within 48 hours, I'd uncovered Blackwood's entire operation. 7 military families had lost their homes in the past 2 years. Each time, the properties were sold to Blackwood's relatives or business partners for pennies on the dollar, then immediately flipped for massive profits. The HOA's financials were a disaster. Blackwood had been siphoning money into his construction company, leaving the association nearly bankrupt while residents paid ever-increasing fees. But the most shocking discovery came from my friend Jake Martinez, a military lawyer stationed in Germany. Pine Valley Estates was built on land that had never been properly released from federal military jurisdiction. Marcus, Jake explained over a secure video call, the entire subdivision is technically still under Department of Defense oversight. The original land transfer in 1987 was never completed due to a paperwork error. Legally, you're looking at federal property being managed by civilian entities without proper authorization. The plan began forming in my mind. I had 4 months left on my deployment, and I used every spare moment building an airtight case. My fellow soldiers, many of whom had similar HOA horror stories, helped gather evidence. Sergeant Collins, a former police detective, helped me document the financial fraud. We traced shell companies, fake transactions, and money laundering that would make federal prosecutors salivate. Captain Rodriguez, whose family had lost their home to a similar scam in Texas, connected me with the Military Family Legal Aid Network. They'd been tracking HOA fraud targeting deployed service members nationwide. Lieutenant Parker, a computer specialist, helped me hack into, well, let's call it access through proper channels, the HOA's digital records. What we found was devastating. Blackwood had been forging signatures on legal documents, creating fake violation notices, and even paying off local judges to expedite foreclosure proceedings. The corruption ran deeper than anyone imagined. 2 months before my return, I launched the opening salvo from 7,000 miles away. I filed complaints with the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division, the Department of Defense Inspector General, the State Attorney General's Office, the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, the Department of Veterans Affairs Fraud Hotline. Each complaint was meticulously documented with evidence that would make any prosecutor's career. But I wasn't done. Through military legal channels, I filed a federal lawsuit claiming the entire subdivision was operating illegally on federal property. I demanded immediate cessation of all HOA activities and return of all properties to military oversight. The legal papers were served to Blackwood while he was at the country club, celebrating another acquisition from a deployed soldier. According to my neighbor, his face went white as he read the documents. The party ended quickly. I landed at Denver International Airport on a cold February morning, wearing my dress blues and carrying a briefcase full of legal documents. My wife Sarah met me at the gate, tears in her eyes. "They changed the locks on our house," she whispered. We've been staying at my sister's. I held her close, feeling the weight of the injustice, but also feeling the satisfaction of knowing what was coming. Don't worry, baby. By next month, we'll own this entire neighborhood. The first federal agents arrived at Pine Valley Estates 3 days after my return. FBI, IRS, and military investigators swarmed the HOA office like ants on a dropped ice cream cone. Blackwood tried to act innocent, but his empire was crumbling. Bank accounts were frozen. Construction projects halted. The local newspaper ran front-page stories about the HOA fraud ring. Then came the big announcement that shook the entire community. A federal judge ruled that due to the incomplete 1987 land transfer, Pine Valley Estates was still technically federal property. All civilian property transfers after that date were void. The entire subdivision would be placed under military administration pending resolution. Overnight, Blackwood went from neighborhood king to federal fugitive. The Department of Defense moved quickly. They established a temporary military administration office right in the subdivision's community center. Colonel Patricia Williams, a stern woman with silver hair and steel eyes, was appointed as interim administrator. Her first order of business was reviewing every property transaction from the past 5 years. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced at a packed community meeting, "we're going to fix this mess. Every family that lost their home through fraudulent means will be compensated. Every illegal fee will be refunded. Every forged document will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of military and civilian law." The residents erupted in cheers. Blackwood, who had somehow managed to avoid arrest, sat in the back row looking like he'd seen a ghost. Within 2 weeks, the military investigation uncovered the full scope of Blackwood's operation. 17 properties had been illegally seized. Over $2.3 million had been stolen from HOA accounts. Dozens of families had been victimized. But the best part? The military had authority to reclaim all property obtained through fraud. I'll never forget the morning when military police showed up at Blackwood's mansion, the one he'd built with stolen HOA funds. They handed him an eviction notice signed by a federal judge. "You have 24 hours to vacate these premises. This property is being seized as evidence in a federal fraud investigation." Blackwood's wife started crying. His teenage kids looked confused and embarrassed. For the first time, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The trials were swift and decisive. Blackwood received 12 years in federal prison for fraud, money laundering, and violating the Service Members Civil Relief Act. His construction company was dissolved, assets liquidated to compensate victims. His co-conspirators, the corrupt property manager, 2 local officials, and even the judge who had expedited foreclosures, all received their own prison sentences. But the real satisfaction came from the military's final decision about Pine Valley Estates. Colonel Williams called me into her temporary office 6 months after the investigation began. The community center had been transformed into an efficient military administration hub, complete with proper filing systems and transparent procedures. "Sergeant Thompson," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk, "the Department of Defense has reached a decision about the long-term administration of this property." I sat down, curious about what came next. "Given the civilian corruption and the fact that this community houses 47 military families, we're establishing Pine Valley Estates as a permanent military housing community. We need a civilian liaison to help manage the transition." She slid a contract across the desk. "The position comes with a substantial salary, full benefits, and a guaranteed 30-year lease on any property in the subdivision at below-market rates. We'd like you to consider the role of community director." I stared at the contract, hardly believing what I was reading. The salary was triple what I'd made in the Army. The benefits were incredible. And the housing lease. "You're offering me Blackwood's old house?" I asked, recognizing the address. Colonel Williams smiled, the first time I'd seen her expression soften. "That mansion was built with stolen money from military families. It seems fitting that it should house the person who brought down the whole operation." Moving into Blackwood's former mansion was surreal. The house had 7 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, a 3-car garage and a swimming pool. Sarah cried when she saw our new home. But the real victory wasn't the house. It was the transformation of the entire community. Under military administration, HOA fees dropped by 60%. All the ridiculous rules about grass height and mailbox colors were eliminated. Military families received priority housing assignments and deployment protections. The community center was converted into a resource hub for military families, offering financial counseling, legal aid, and deployment support services. Property values actually increased because buyers knew they were purchasing into a well-managed, corruption-free community. 2 years after taking over as community director, I received an unexpected visitor. Richard Blackwood, on supervised release after serving his minimum sentence, stood at my front door looking hollow and defeated. "I wanted to apologize," he said quietly. "What I did was wrong. I destroyed families and I'm sorry." I studied his face looking for signs of deception. All I saw was a broken man who had lost everything. "Apology noted," I replied. "But forgiveness will take time." He nodded and turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, you did the right thing. This community is better now." As I watched him walk away, I felt something I hadn't expected: pity. Blackwood had traded a lifetime of legitimate success for a few years of stolen wealth. Now he had nothing. 5 years later, Pine Valley Estates has become a model military community. Other bases around the country send delegations to study our management system. The community has expanded to include veteran services, job training programs, and educational support for military children. My house, Blackwood's former mansion, hosts monthly barbecues for military families. The pool where he once entertained corrupt officials now echoes with the laughter of children whose parents serve our country. Sarah and I have 2 kids now, and they're growing up in a community that values service, integrity, and justice. They'll never know the fear of losing their home to corrupt officials while their father is deployed overseas. The whole experience taught me that sometimes the system works, but only when good people are willing to fight for what's right. Blackwood thought he could prey on military families because we were deployed and defenseless. He was wrong. Military training doesn't just teach you how to fight foreign enemies. It teaches you how to investigate, organize, build coalitions, and execute complex operations. All skills that translate perfectly to fighting domestic corruption. The other lesson is that justice sometimes takes unexpected forms. I didn't just get my house back. I got a better house, a better community, and a career helping other military families avoid similar situations. Blackwood lost everything, but his loss became everyone else's gain. Today, Pine Valley Estates stands as proof that corruption can be defeated, justice can prevail, and sometimes the good guys really do win. The community thrives under military administration, property values continue rising, and families feel secure knowing their homes are protected by federal oversight. As I write this story from my home office, in what used to be Blackwood's private study, I can see military families enjoying the community pool, kids playing safely in well-maintained parks, and neighbors helping neighbors without fear of HOA harassment. Richard Blackwood tried to steal from those who serve our country. Instead, he inadvertently created the best military housing community in America. Sometimes revenge is best served with justice, integrity, and a federal investigation. The war was over. We won.